Democrats have been anchoring on the scandal surrounding House Bill 6 as they campaign in Ohio, and they proposed a group of bills that they say will deal with corruption in state government. The latest, a bill to ban statewide office holders from holding down jobs in the private sector or serving in any paid positions. It's aimed squarely at Republican Lieutenant Governor Jon Husted, who was elected by his fellow shareholders to the board of directors of Heartland Bank earlier this year. I spoke with one of the sponsors of the bill, who's also an outspoken critic of House Bill 6.
Absolutely. I think it should apply to all statewide elected officials. I think it goes without saying. I think this is a common sense bill. But in particular, I think it's very disconcerting that Lieutenant Governor Husted, who makes more than I think any statewide elected or legislative person in the state, is now taking a corporate paid board position in addition to his significant salary, which I think is also more than a member of Congress makes, and not so far disclosing what he's being paid in that position. So I think Ohioans deserve to know that their statewide elected officials are fully accountable to them.
This $176,000 is indeed more than the governor, which is $100,517 more than any Supreme Court justice, more than state lawmakers, which you would know, of course. Husted said when he was asked about his position on the board of Heartland Bank that he'd thought about investing in a community bank and joining its board for many years, and that his work on workforce, technology, innovation, and regulatory issues will be enhanced by what he learns on this board of directors job, and that none of what he will do there will conflict with what he does as lieutenant governor. How do you see that statement?
I read that and hear that as an overlap in responsibilities between his jobs as a lieutenant governor and his responsibilities as a corporate board officer. I mean, a significant major bank in Ohio is going to have tentacles into a lot of the business that the state does. So that's deeply disconcerting. If he wants to do this and he's so interested in banking, then he should resign as lieutenant governor and go work for a bank, right? But he has taken and sworn an oath to Ohioans and should be accountable, again, with the highest salary of any, I think, state elected official, as you just mentioned, by far should be accountable to Ohioans first.
This is one of several bills that Democrats have proposed in this whole portfolio dealing with integrity. You've got the Anti-Corruption Act requiring dark money groups to identify their contributors and disclose their spending. Public Corruption Repayment Act requires legislators to reimburse the state for compensation received between the time they were indicted for a felony involving public corruption and their conviction, which is interesting that that is not in state law now. Also, there's House Bill 6, which you've been speaking out about a lot. You want to look at some of the provisions of House Bill 6. In fact, I think you want to repeal the whole thing.
I want to repeal the whole thing, and I think there's a big misconception out there that when we got rid of, when we booted Larry Householder from the House, that House Bill 6 got unwound, but it hasn't been. It wasn't. When we got rid of Sam Randazzo, it didn't matter. The law is still in place, largely in place. There were some nuclear subsidies repealed, but the energy efficiency standards that were so successful by PUCO's own studies that have saved Ohioans billions of dollars in the cheapest energy there is, energy you don't use, our renewable standard got unwound in that process. And what was also kept was a coal bailout through OVEC, which included 2 coal plants, one of which is, yes, in Indiana, Madison, Indiana, where I trekked last year with my colleague Jeff Crossman, about an hour over the border. We're not getting those jobs. We're not getting that energy. It's a 1950s era coal plant that Ohioans are bailing out because of House Bill 6. So yes, I would very much like to see those subsidies repealed, and there are bipartisan efforts right now in the House to do just that. I just want to see those advanced.
You have noted that it costs Ohioans $12,000 every hour for those bailouts, but it's also been noted that there's some credits that are starting to go back to AEP customers because of this, and that this is slowly unwinding already.
Slowly and unfortunately disproportionately not fully making consumers whole. And if you take a step back from that whole process, we clearly have a corruption problem, but we're also a state that's moving in the wrong direction. When you look at our neighboring states, red and blue, there are massive investments being made in renewable energy, in efficiency, that we are no longer doing in Ohio, or we're doing our darn best not to allow them to move forward. So I'd like to see us take a 21st century, how about a 20th century approach to energy policy in Ohio and take a step in the right direction.
Representative Bill Seitz, a Republican from Cincinnati, has pushed back on that with you on social media, saying that the coal plants are indeed crediting Ohio ratepayers' bills and that Germany is rushing to reopen their coal plants. China never quit building them. There are those people who would say that what you're saying is not the total story.
Well, Bill Seitz is really the architect of House Bill 6. If you go back, House Bill 6 is the famous bill, but there have been several Zen or related bills that First Energy attempted in multiple GAs, successive GAs, one before I got into the legislature to do this. And Bill Seitz was very much, it's been reported, was very much involved in crafting the legislation over that time. And he's also taken, I think I saw at least $7,000 in direct contributions, or in the range of $7,000 in contributions from First Energy. So it doesn't surprise me that he is a big backer of the bill. And, you know, there are some very temporary increases in coal power going on in different parts of the world because of the war in Ukraine and an energy crunch that's affecting regionally in Europe. But if you look at the broad sweep and the trajectory that we are heading globally, and that includes China, it is investment in additional capacity, retiring coal plants, retiring gas plants, and moving toward wind and solar power. And that's what I'd like to see us do in Ohio.
And there's investment coming from the federal government, of course, in what's known as the Inflation Reduction Act that would deal with some of that.
There is, but we are shutting, at the same time, renewable energy out from huge swaths of Ohio because of a law we passed this past year, giving communities a basically poison pill to prevent any utility scales renewable energy from being in their community. So I worry that investment is going to go to neighboring states and not to Ohio.
And finally, back on the corruption aspect here, there were these text messages that were released from two now fired First Energy executives that appear to implicate Governor Mike DeWine, a state official one, and Lieutenant Governor Jon Husted, a state official two, in First Energy's deferred plea agreement where they admitted to bribing Sam Randazzo, the former chair of the Public Utilities Commission, and former Speaker Larry Householder. Now, DeWine and Husted have said that they had no involvement in House Bill 6. What was in the legislation was what lawmakers put in it, and that they were always clear that they supported the idea of bailing out the nuclear plants because of their role in Ohio's economic and environmental climate. So I want to ask you, I mean, you did not vote for House Bill 6, but there were several Democrats, 12 Democrats, 9 in the House and 3 in the Senate that voted for it, along with all the Republicans who did, though there were some Republicans who didn't. So this isn't just a Republican versus Democrat bill.
I think some of my colleagues, to be fair, on both sides of the aisle, took what we were told by the chair of the Public Utilities Commission at face value, and took what we were being told by the Speaker of the House at the time at face value, or by First Energy. We essentially trusted people. And I think what you've seen is repeated assertions by Governor DeWine, by Lieutenant Governor Husted that they weren't involved, and then we see private email exchanges, and then we see text message exchanges. And we also just follow the money, right? I've learned I'm just in my second term, but you can follow the money, and you can see that millions of dollars, both dark and reportable money, in some, have been contributed over time to Governor DeWine. And he took not only money directly, but for his daughter in a race, I believe it was Greene County prosecutor, could be wrong on that, but I believe it was a Greene County local race that, to my knowledge, First Energy had no direct, it was not really a race that would directly impact their business. And yet there was a six-figure sum directed to her. This just stinks to me. And it just honestly upsets me. And when you talk about integrity and corruption, this goes to the core of pay to play and what everybody hates about politics, that this is how it happens. So I want the governor to disclose all communications that he's had with First Energy to clear the air and let us all be reassured that he had nothing to do behind the scenes with ultimately, beyond appointing Sam Randazzo in that position, getting this thing passed into law.
Husted has said what was advocated for, what he and DeWine advocated for the power plants to be bailed out and for them to remain part of Ohio's energy portfolio, is different than what Larry Householder and Sam Randazzo, who has not been charged, are accused of doing. Are those two things different, or are they inexorably tied together?
There's so much dark money that went into this massive cesspool, some of which was deployed against me in 2018 as I sat on a couch with my wife watching 60 Minutes, which is expensive TV, let me tell you. It's hard to track. It's hard to know. What is clear is that enormous sums of money over many years were given to dark money groups unaccountable groups, these 501c4s, that is almost untraceable, although is being unwound in the criminal process, and directly that we know about to legislators and to Governor DeWine, and again to his family members, that I think it's clear influenced the passage of this law, which Ohioans are still on the hook for today.
Weinstein says the bill banning statewide office holders from holding paid private jobs should not apply to state lawmakers because those are part-time positions, and that the legislature has a long tradition of having members from a wide variety of professions.